Hello, you beautiful infinite beings, right onto your path of exploring the infinite, your infinite potential, your infinite truth, and ultimately your infinite self. Thank you for tuning in today's video in which I'm going to be speaking about darkness. Yes, I'm going to be speaking about misery, about miserable times, about darkness, about dark, very dark times, and about all sorts of down time periods that could be sadness, depression, and even darkness that's triggered by traumatic experiences and crisis times, and how to utilize all of these experiences or this darkness, this dark emotional space that you're in order to turn your life around to the best, and how to utilize this darkness to propel yourself towards your infinite potential, and how this darkness could be used to actually get you towards steps closer towards enlightenment and your true purpose, in which you're going to be fulfilled and content. Just consider it as your very enlightening teacher. That's what darkness really is. And I know it might come as unbelievable or impossible, but to me, the way I look at it, darkness has become one of the most controversial topics of all time. What once was deemed as this evil, devilish, ploys of the universe in getting back at us, or you know this very negative experience that's only crushing and devastating and degrades our quality of life, is now seen. Darkness is now seen, and you can observe it by all kinds of influencers, life coaches, and psychologists, and all sorts of successful people, even businessmen and very successful entrepreneurs. They've all come to agree, and they're all discussing nowadays that in order for them to have gotten wherever they are at this point of this, for to get in order for them to have gotten to this life that they're very fond of, and it resonates with them deeply, and it's what they consider their purpose. They've had to go through very dark periods, and they've had to hit rock bottom before reaching all the way to the top. And the reason is because it is true. Just think of it as a system, as a pattern in this life. Think of it, I'd like you to think of it as the price you have to pay in order to deserve the next upgrade in your life. And it's probably something that you've attracted onto yourself because you've desired for an upgrade, and maybe you've had a dilemma. This is building on the concept of you being the creator of your own life, of you being a tool for attraction and manifestation. And I'm gonna get much deeper into these kind of topics later on in later videos, and there's a lot to be said about these things, so stick around if you like. And while I'm at it, if you enjoy watching my videos, please like and subscribe to watch more of this. But anyway, think of it as the price, because it's a fixed pattern. It's an absolute, almost, it's a given in this life that in order to acquire something, you need to pay for it in one way or another. Think of material possessions, for example, or a privilege or a pleasure, or there's a payment. Almost always a payment exists, whether it's material, financial, or emotional, or mental. In the case of relationships, you have to pay some emotional and by some mental and physiological. You have to do some changes to make some relations work. You have to, and so on and so forth. And even think about happiness. Take bungee jumping or skydiving, for example. In order to attain the adrenaline rush, in order to attain this happiness and feeling of bliss during this jump. You need to invest in energy. You need to invest in fear. You need to give out this fear. You need to experience the opposite, the counter, as a payment before experiencing what you are really desiring. And that's a given, and that's the whole point. And we've learned to accept it with some things, but rejected with many other things. You see, we've been conditioned for too long that to just bear the good, to just tolerate our lives when they are going our way, when we're happy and we're fortunate. But whenever something bad happens, whenever we're faced with negative emotions and we start cursing our lives and we start being resentful and hateful, and we go into self-pity, and depression causes all these sort of things, for example. And for example, the Stoics would say, philosophers like Epictetus and Seneca, they often emphasize that virtue is enough for a life of happiness, is enough to attain happiness. So living a virtuous life should be enough to have a happy life, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the outcomes. And so they carried on to discuss, to explain that that's why a truth seeker and a seeker, an enlightened person, or as they said, as a sage, should be almost resilient to entirely resilient to misfortune. And while that's all good and great, it's in most cases it's not how it works. Our ego gets the best of us and it overwhelms us. When we experience dark times, what happens is that our ego is rejecting what's going on in our life, and that's why we crumble. There's this intense conflict between what our ego is expecting of life and what's actually going on. And that's why it just crashes, and it cowers back into rejection and to ignorance. And what oftentimes it would lead you to is coping mechanisms, and plenty of that, and there's plenty of these to come. And it's just out of survival, it gets you into survival mode. And in survival mode, you need to preserve your life, and to preserve your life you need to preserve your health. And by health, it includes your nervous system, your mental aptitude, your hormonal balance, and all these kind of things. And in order for it, when it's been depleted of these things by what's going on in your course of life, it shocks you, it triggers you, it stimulates you into going into all these pleasures, into all of these coping mechanisms, which could be pleasures, entertainment. It comes in all sorts, any kind of, from whether drinking or indulging in any sort of intoxicating materials, or just, not bearing being alone and always hanging, going out, pushing you to always go out and be around people and be around people, and just, don't be by yourself, or binge watching or binge eating. It comes in many forms, and that's what sadness causes, because our ego cannot bear the life. It cannot bear the simple fact of life, because this is the course of life. It's ups and downs. But what we need to understand is to be as okay with the downs as we are with the ups, if that makes sense. And that's why we need to be at least somewhat resilient to misfortune. Take it with with a hint of salt. Just don't be very apprehensive and rejecting of it. But that's again much easier said than done. And so what really matters is how we approach this given darkness, the perspective we have when we're approaching this darkness. Because if we approach it as this evil ploy by life, and this very negative experience that's crushing us and demoting us in life, and it's just jeopardizing, turning our lives upside down and becoming resentful and all of these things, it's only gonna be ever gonna be this. If that's how you approach it, then that's all it will ever be. But if you choose to look at it as, and that's the beauty about darkness. It's a double-edged sword, a very good one at it. It's like the epitome of double-edged sword, because on the other hand, darkness takes so much from us that it opens plenty of space within us for many other things to rise up, for many other things to come into our life, if we just accept it, if we remain aligned with it, if we let it take its course and feel its course, rather than escaping and indulging in coping mechanisms. It's gonna be very rewarding. And oftentimes, like I was saying in the beginning of the video, is that more often than not is something that you have attracted upon yourself. You need to understand that by going through maybe a major dilemma, you've created this. I think I mentioned it. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but if it's by desiring an upgrade, but not acting upon this upgrade, and then going to dilemma and what you're do, whether you should remain in your comfortable position at this moment in life, or should you work on your towards your upgrade or not. And if this goes long enough, this dilemma, and it causes lots of abrupt disruptions and distortions in your energy, then you attract what you're basically desiring is something to attract something that puts you onto that level, that gives you forces on you, that kind of upgrade. That's what you're attracting. And basically, like I was saying, think of it as the price you are paying to deserve it. To It's not to deserve it, it's rather, it's more fittingly is it's to align with it, to align with this resonance within you, to reach that alignment with the energy of that thing, with the frequency of that thing. And maybe through this darkness you're gonna learn some things that you need to know before you get to that upgrade. But anyway, to the thing about darkness, when you encounter dark time, when you encounter depression, for example, what happens, just think about it, the last time you've been through a dark phase, or if you're going through one now, if you observe yourself and if you notice closely, is that you stop caring. You reach to a level of indifference that's most likely is unattainable through any other thing than darkness, unless you're very disciplined and you've taught yourself to lose all attachments and to become devoid of the ego, and to not humor the ego all of the time. Then you are probably closer towards this indifference. And what I mean by indifference is indifference to your attachments. What happens when you're very, very sad, when you're going through whether a crisis or just a very dark time in general, is that you stop caring about all of your ego desires, all of the needs that are generated by the ego. And those come in the form of everything. It could be you stop caring about, if you're going to school, you stop caring about your grades. If you're working, you stop caring about your progress, about how well you're doing your job. If you stop caring about what your family think, you stop caring about what your friends think, you stop caring about what the society is telling you to be, what the societal standards are. You stop caring about all of these conditioning and learnings that were enforced upon you for decades by the society, by people around you, by just the general standards going around in the world, the mainstream. You stop caring about the mainstream. You don't care what is success, for example? What's required, what's expected by you from the society, what's how successful you should be. You stop caring about all of these things, and you just want to maintain your being, you just want to maintain your essence. It's like you're fed up. It's almost like you're fed up of all of these things. And one of the things you need to know is that dark times, it's both an obstacle and an opportunity that's laid to you by your higher self, by your infinite divine source energy, whatever it may be. It is something that's, in order, because for you to attain this something that you've desired, it's been laid to you by your higher self as an obstacle to to let you know that you need to take a step back and rethink what you're doing, to align. Are you sure you want to keep doing this? And that's why, partially related to why you stop caring, it's like taking everything from you in order to have a clearer mind. But if you invest this clear mind, this in order to have a clearer mind, to make the decision that really resonates within you, that's really coming from the bottom of your heart, from a deep heart calling, your intuition. Because when you stop caring about all of these things, what happens, that's the beauty, is that your intuition becomes more and more fierce, it becomes sharper, and you start aligning more and more with your higher self, because you deny the ego so bad. You've taken, you're not investing in whatever the ego wants. You're not doing all of these things. You've dropped your standards, your societal expectations, your family, friends' expectations, your all of these things that were burdening you, that were imposed upon you by others' conditioning, has been dropped. And so your higher self now, your infinite, your true self now has space to come through, has space to express itself. And oftentimes that could be bypassed by many people by indulging in pleasures and all sorts of coping mechanisms. And that's why it's very dangerous. You need to let it take its course. You need to sit it sit yourself in and cry it all out if you want, and scream and shout it all out if you'd like. Just let it take the course it's meant to take. You've attracted this upon yourself for a very specific reason, so you need to feel these kind of feelings. Don't run away at the first, from at the first sight of sadness, to raise yourself up again artificially. Don't seek this dopamine hit when you've been depleted of it for good reasons, by your own attraction, in order to see something, to have a clearer vision. Now, the other thing that could happen is that you might succumb to the darkness of this, become resentful and hateful, and reject what's happening entirely, that you stop. And while you're doing that, you stop even accepting your intuition, you stop accepting your higher self, you stop accepting what's trying to come into your life. So also be aware of this. Don't let yourself to just become that resentful, that negative, and think of it as just something that's ruined your life, because it's not. And just don't give up. Just always have hope. Don't let it make you hopeless, and don't let it turn you to a helpless person, because you're not. You live, you are more than what you think you are. You live with your higher self. You are a higher self. You are the infinite. You're a manifestation of the infinite in this 3D reality, functioning as your ego. So don't let it crush you, and don't think that that's all there is to your life. Don't let it define your life. Don't let these dark periods define your life, and don't become so identified with all that's happening. And always remember that it's happening for the best. Just seize it. Just approach it with an open mind, and See what it's trying, observe closely what it's trying to teach you. Because now everything else that you've been conditioned to care about is gone. It's dropped momentarily, most likely, but it's dropped. So take in what's coming. Just keep taking all that's coming, and see where it's leading you, where your heart is really leading you. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to realize this, even, I mean, to sort of realize it. It's not as I'm explaining it right now, but I've realized that there's something special about darkness the first time I encountered real darkness. I mean, my whole life was probably dysfunctional and distorted, and for many reasons, I've done all of the shadow work, and I've realized that this is what happened. I was never really comfortable in my skin, and there's always, I was just trying to belong so desperately, and it made my whole life a miserable one. But in general, like the real encounter with darkness was during my first year of college, and that came in the shape of clinical depression. It was devastating at first, but I knew there was something about it, because it was changing me. This darkness was making me something else. But the other pro that I had was, I was I was around no one. I was staying alone. I was in dorms, and I stayed away from all my friends. I stayed away from, and I realized there's something special. It's teaching me. It's leading me to learn things, to 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 inquire about certain things, and it's things I've never cared about, and that's why I was attached to it, and I had like a toxic relationship with depression for a very long time. But that's for another video, and it's already taken too long. So I don't want to hold you any longer. So just remember that it's more than it is. Darkness comes as an opportunity and as an obstacle. You're meant to overcome the obstacle and seize the opportunity in order to upgrade your life. I hope I did not forget anything. I'm having the feeling that I forgot something important to say, something that really I wanted to say in some point in the video, but I did not. So if there is something, after rewatching this, I'll just leave a note next to what I wanted to say at the moment in which I wanted to say it. Anyhow, I wish you a great day and a great life. Thank you once again for tuning in, and please don't forget to like and subscribe, and just stay tuned for many more videos.